the empty tomb, in Jerusalem, around 1900 years ago, together with other evidences of the resurrection of Jesus, stamped the divine seal of approval, not only upon the words and deeds of the young Galilean Jew, but also, as we have seen, on the message of the Hebrew and Greek scriptures, of which he was the living embodiment. From that time to this, the long and dreary history of the world, fulfilling as it has so many prophetic passages, including, in particular, much of the books of Daniel and Revelation, has further confirmed those writings. The real power of the confirmation, however, lies not in the mere fact that events were predicted in advance, but in the story and message of those events, when viewed in the divine light shed upon them by the word of God. The overall theme of that story has been the warfare between Rome and Israel, a warfare that had its roots in the events in the Garden of Eden. The combatants have been manifested variously, and the circumstances have changed with the times. But the issue between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent has remained the same. Pagan Rome gave way to Pago-Christian Rome, the spores of which bore fruit in the civilizations of Europe and elsewhere. The Jews, God's firstborn national son, felt the persecution of that merciless monster during the revolts of the first 2 centuries AD, the long night of the diaspora and the Dark Ages, and even more in recent so-called enlightened times. In these sufferings, the Jews have not been alone, even though in sheer quantity they have carried by far the greatest burden. The seed of the woman has had other representatives, in the form of Christ's brethren, both Jew and Gentile, whose affectionate belief in the hope of Israel has provoked Rome's venom and led to chains, torture, and death. The Jews have, understandably, developed a deep distrust of all called Christians because of their experiences at the hands of the church, be it Catholic, Orthodox or Protestant, so that, in the main, they have distanced themselves even from the few that are their true friends. But a day of reconciliation with the latter is at hand, when the Jews will recognize their Nazarene brother, whom they effectively sold into Egypt. In the unfathomable wisdom of God, out of all this evil, will be produced much good. The witness of the Jew in his sufferings has already touched the consciences of a remnant of mankind down the ages, and inspired fruitful searching of the scriptures for the answers to the perplexities of life. Simultaneously, those same sufferings at the hands of Rome have been developing a situation amongst the nations that will bring her war against God's people to a climax, from the violent convulsions of which a new Israel and a new worldwide order will be born. Through the grace of God, these final sufferings will create from the remnant of the Jews a nation of faith and righteousness, which will become a messenger of salvation to the remnants of mankind. But the key to this work of salvation with Israel is the return of Jesus Christ, the Messiah of Israel, the King of the Jews. If any further proof of Israel's special relationship with the God of heaven be required, I cite one testimony among many, the words of God through Moses to Israel at Mount Sinai.
If they shall confess their iniquity, and the iniquity of their fathers, with their trespass which they trespassed against me, and that also they have walked contrary unto me, and that I also have walked contrary unto them, and have brought them into the land of their enemies, if then their uncircumcised hearts be humbled, and they then accept of the punishment of their iniquity, then will I remember my covenant with Jacob, and also my covenant with Isaac, and also my covenant with Abraham will I remember, and I will remember the land. The land also shall be left of them, and shall enjoy her Sabbaths while she lieth desolate without them. And they shall accept of their punishment of their iniquity, because they despised my judgments, and because their soul abhorred my statutes. And yet for all that, when they be in the land of their enemies, I will not cast them away, neither will I abhor them, to destroy them utterly, and to break my covenant with them. For I am the Lord their God. But I will for their sakes remember the covenant of their ancestors, whom I brought forth out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the heathen, that I might be their God. I am the Lord.
Contrary to what many who call themselves Christian imagine, The return of Jesus Christ has a direct and intimate involvement with the plight and deliverance of the natural Jews, the seed of Abraham according to the flesh. This grand event will also witness the resurrection of the dead, but not all, who have ever lived, because, as scripture states,
Man that is in honor and understandeth not is like the beasts that perish. They are dead, they shall not live. They are deceased, they shall not rise. Therefore hast thou visited and destroyed them, and made all their memory to perish.
But all who have understood, sufficient of the will of God, to require their obedience, whether they have obeyed or not, whether they are just or unjust, as described by Paul.
But this I confess unto thee, that after the way which they call heresy, so worship I the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets, and have hope toward God which they themselves also allow, that there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and unjust. And herein do I exercise myself to have always a conscience void of offense toward God and toward men.
Those subject to resurrection are defined in Daniel as,
And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt.
Notice that many of them, not all, shall awake. The resurrected ones, who will include both Jews and Gentiles, will be recompensed according to their works around the same time, as indicated in Revelation chapter 11 verse 18, referred to in the last playlist of videos. But the scriptures are emphatic that the resurrection and rewards of faithfulness are coincident with, and coupled to, the foreordained reconciliation of the Jews to their God.
For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Israel shall be saved. As it is written, There shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. Thy dead men shall live, together with my dead body shall they arise. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in dust. For the dew is as the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself as it were for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. For behold, the Lord cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain. Who hath heard such a thing? Who hath seen such things? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children. Shall I bring to the birth and not cause to bring forth, saith the Lord? Shall I cause to bring forth and shut the womb, saith the Lord? Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad with her, all ye that love her. Rejoice for joy with her, all ye that mourn for her. That ye may suck and be satisfied with the breasts of her consolations, that ye may milk out and be delighted with the abundance of her glory. For thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will extend peace to her like a river, and the glory of the Gentiles like a flowing stream. Then shall ye suck, ye shall be borne upon her knees, and be dandled upon her knees. As one whom his mother comforteth, so will I comfort you, and ye shall be comforted in Jerusalem.
Zion's painful travail, therefore, will bring a nation forth from the womb of the earth. Jerusalem's comfort will delight and satisfy them, as faithful King Josiah was the branch in Israel's nostrils in the day of Jeremiah. So, as I have earlier considered, the kings from the sun rising, the children of the resurrection, will be the spirit in the nostrils of the revived nation of Israel. Any, therefore, who are truly identified with the crucified and resurrected Jesus of Nazareth, are sympathetic with, and mentally joined to Jerusalem, Israel and the Jews. If God considers the Jews beloved for the Father's sake, should not those also who are partakers of the same flesh and blood, and guilty of the same failings, extend to them a heart of humility, pity, thankfulness and love? But Rome has heaped scorn and injury on the Jews, and the Protestants have, on a whole, been nearly as bad. Sects like Jehovah's Witnesses pride themselves on having taken Israel's place, but they are all would-be usurpers, who know not the thoughts of the Lord, neither understand they his counsel, and who are destined to be beaten into pieces by Zion's iron horn and brazen hoofs. In contrast to that attitude, Jesus' apostles, even though they were rejected by their generation, looked forward to the restoration of the kingdom of Israel. In considering the return of Jesus Christ to the earth, we shall find that there is a great volume of scripture devoted to the matter. This should not be surprising, because of its enormous significance. The situation parallels that of the first advent, the birth of Christ, which was a focus for a similarly large quantity of scriptural testimony. The return of Christ, which will inaugurate the great day of judgment, will not be welcomed by the world, secular or Christian. It will catch the self-indulgent multitudes as in a giant trap. Jesus' warning, recorded plainly in the New Testament, are abundantly clear on this point.
And as it was in the days of Noe, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage, until the day that Noe entered into the ark, and the flood came, and destroyed them all. Likewise also as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded, but the same day that Lot went out of Sodom it rained fire and brimstone from heaven, and destroyed them all. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noe entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness, and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. For as a snare shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth.
The parallels of modern society with the days of Noah and of Sodom are only too strong, as I discussed in the last video. Though the precise time of Christ's return was hidden from men, signs were given by which the epoch of Christ's coming could be discerned. To the clearest of these I have already referred, the main one being the restoration of the Jewish people to Israel and Jerusalem. Jerusalem would be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. There was also Jesus' parable of the budding fig tree.
And he spake to them a parable. Behold the fig tree, and all the trees. When they now shoot forth, ye see and know of your own selves that summer is now nigh at hand. So likewise ye, when ye see these things come to pass, know ye that the kingdom of God is nigh at hand.
The symbol of the fig tree is full of meaning. Trees in general are symbolic of the nations, as established in Ezekiel chapter 31. And the fig tree, of Israel in particular, as articulated by Jeremiah in chapter 24, Hosea chapter 9 and Joel chapter 1. Jesus had used it in reference to the generation of Jews of his own day, in Luke chapter 13 and Matthew chapter 21. Fig trees are also indigenous to Israel, often being planted near homes for fruit and summer shade, as stated in 1 Kings chapter 4 and Micah 4. The fig symbol is also used by modern Israel. The fruit and leaf buds formed at the end of winter are a sure pointer to the coming summer with its promise of harvest. That the fig tree has budded during the 5th, 6th and 7th decades of the 20th century, none can deny. Consequently, the blazing heat of summer, in which God's sickles of judgment will reap the grain harvest of the nations, and gather the vine of the earth for treading in the great winepress of wrath, is near at hand. Just as a side note, as I'm personally a fruit tree grower myself, and I have noticed how little anyone even more so in the Western cultures, takes nature, the seasons and farming into account. I would like to point out that it takes about 90 days for a fig to go from bud to edible fruit. If the budding started in 1948, at the foundation of the State of Israel, given a day for a year, I would expect harvest to be around 2038, but this is purely speculation on my part. Let's get back to a more biblical-based analysis. Another observation can be made from Jesus' words, "Behold the fig tree, and all the trees." The budding of other trees is also a sign of the coming summer. The world in the last century has witnessed a virtual end to the era of colonialism and the emergence of a host of independent nations all clamoring for recognition in the forum of civilization. The frog-like spirits of democracy and independence, utilizing powerful global communications networks, have produced a situation in which all the peoples of the earth can and will be involved in the climax of the ages. In the 16th chapter of Revelation, immediately after the statement concerning the work of the frog-like spirits, gathering the kings of the whole world unto the war of the great days of God, is inserted an urgent personal warning from Jesus Christ.
Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame.
This exhortation to faithfulness on the part of individuals implies both the fewness of those who will be ready and the ever-present danger of being caught up in the sensual and demoniacal spirit of the times. During his ministry, Jesus had stressed the almost entire absence of true followers that would be longing for his coming when that moment arrived.
And shall not God avenge his own elect which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth?
Only 8 had been saved in the days of Noah. I wonder how many will be prepared for this latter-day crisis. In spite of the troubles experienced during the outpourings of the first 6 bowls of wrath, there will be a lull before the storm of the 7th bowl is unleashed. This is stated clearly by Paul.
But of the times and seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say, Peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape.
A declaration of peace and safety at this juncture implies that insecurity and a threat of war had existed, but that there were now grounds for considerable optimism. Do the scriptures give any indication of how such a situation could arise? As we shall see, worldwide disarmament will not be the reason, since the nations, small as well as great, will prepare war in accordance with Joel chapter 3 verse 9, and arrive at Armageddon, armed to the teeth. I believe there are a number of pointers to the effect that the enthusiastic anticipation of peace will arise from the achievement of a form of greater European unity, inclusive of Russia, through the influence of Rome. It is certain, as I have shown in the last playlist of videos, that such a unity, intrinsically fragile though its organization be, will come about. It is also reasonable to believe that such an eventuality will be accompanied by widespread expectations of peace. But there is more than reasoned logic to go on. There is the fact that the frog-like spirits from the Kremlin, Rome and Europe will bring the nations together. There is the picture of the prosperity that will be associated with the alliance symbolized by the great Babylon harlot, riding the 7-headed 10-horned scarlet-colored beast of Revelation chapter 17. A prosperity the loss of which will be greatly lamented by the merchants of the earth when the harlot is destroyed. Then there is the prophecy of the Roman king of fierce countenance of Daniel chapter 8, who shall in his heart and in their security shall he destroy many. A prophecy that implies the ensnarement of nations through the promise of security. There are also the events of Daniel chapter 3, in which an image of the Babylonian kingdom of men was erected by Nebuchadnezzar, the worship of which he proclaimed as the unifying factor in his multinational great society, an unholy union in which certain Jews alone would not join. The events are allegorical of a latter-day Tower of Babel episode associated with the Church of Great Babylon, that will unite the Catholic, Orthodox and other peoples of Europe and Russia into a glittering society of commercial wealth and military power, with the Jews once again the misfits. As the dream of a world peace, centered in the Euro-Asian Confederation, with the Roman Ecumenical Church providing both international links and an aura of religious constitutionality, seems on the verge of realization, but a disruptive Jewish influence will give anti-Semitism an appearance of legitimacy. The age-old hatred for the chosen people, always smoldering among the nations, and especially so in Catholic countries, will be evoked in one last universal pogrom which will seal the doom of its perpetrators. The fiery furnace prepared for the Jewish non-collaborators of the new regime will, in its sevenfold intensity, destroy the anti-Semites, but purify Israel and the Jews. The final struggle in the war between Rome and the Jews will occur in two distinct phases, the first in the Middle East, and the second in Europe and the world. These are signified in the book of Revelation as the harvest and the vintage.
And I looked, and behold a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God.
Both phases of this war are comprehended by the seventh bowl of wrath, poured out upon the air, and described in Revelation from chapter 16 verse 17 to the end of chapter 19. The preparation for the harvest judgments is described in Revelation chapter 16 verse 16.
And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon.
The place, in Hebrew called Har-magedōn, is the only occurrence of this word in Greek New Testament, and there is no known place with this name, and attempts to make it signify the hill of Megiddo require a certain amount of imagination. But the fact that it is said to be called in Hebrew clearly implies that the word has a significance in the Hebrew language and denotes a location in the land where Hebrew is the native tongue. Remarkably, Hebrew has only, in recent times, been resurrected for official and everyday use in the Jewish homeland, so that such an application is possible. When the Greek term is transferred into its fundamental Hebrew equivalents, it can be expressed as Armageddon, and translated as a heap of corn or sheaves, and valley, judgment. This interpretation is in perfect accord with the description of the judgments of the day of the Lord in the Old Testament. The image of Daniel chapter 2, representing the confederacy of nations in the latter days, is broken to pieces by the stone, so that it becomes like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. Micah uses the concept of threshing more explicitly.
Now also many nations are gathered against thee that say, Let her be defiled, and let our eye look upon Zion. But they know not the thoughts of the Lord, neither understand they his counsel, for he shall gather them as the sheaves into the floor. Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I will make thine horn iron, and I will make thy hoofs brass, and thou shalt beat in pieces many people, and I will consecrate their grain unto the Lord, and their substance unto the Lord of the whole earth.
Thus the judgments of the harvest in the Middle East are in the nature of a violent threshing that will pulverize a multitude of armies gathered against Zion. The location of the valley that will form the threshing floor is described by Joel in his 3rd chapter.
For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and parted my land.
The pleading takes the form of a terrible destruction of fully equipped armies, which have invaded the land.
Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles. Prepare war. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause the mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Let the heathen be wakened, and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the press is full, the vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes, in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision.
The valley of Jehoshaphat, which is the focal point of the divine threshing, has been identified by biblical geographers as either the Kidron Valley, between the Hill of Zion and the Mount of Olives, or the Valley of Hinnom, on the south side of Jerusalem. However, there are no scriptural references to the Valley of Jehoshaphat, apart from those in Joel chapter 3. Nevertheless, from these, the location can be fixed. Jehoshaphat means Yahweh's judgment, and in the context denotes the symbolic name for an actual locality. Shaphat, which means judgment, occurs twice in the chapter. In verse 2, where it is translated plead, and in verse 12, where it is translated judge. According to Robert Girdleston, Shaphat is to be distinguished from the word Don, as in Armageddon, the former signifying the general administration of justice, while the latter is more the act of judgment, particularly condemnation and punishment. This would seem to imply that, while the destruction of Israel's enemies will occur in the valley of Jehoshaphat, there will also be a wider administration of justice to the nations, including, as we shall see, the final vindication of a Jewish remnant. Fittingly, Jehoshaphat is also the name of a faithful king of Judah, who led his people to a victory of faith over a massive invasion that threatened Jerusalem, a victory achieved by divine intervention that caused the invaders to destroy one another, as outlined in 2 Chronicles chapter 20 verses 1 to 30. Armageddon will parallel that event. Joel chapter 3 requires that the valley under consideration be in the vicinity of Zion and Jerusalem. Several other passages are more specific. Zechariah chapter 14 states that God will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle with his feet standing upon the Mount of Olives. That is, God manifest in and represented by the one who was pierced, being Christ. Chapter 12 of the same prophet reads,
Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it.
Isaiah chapter 30, which deals with the name of the Lord coming from far, burning with his anger, to sift the nations with the sieve of vanity and to break a latter-day Assyrian, concludes,
For Tophet is ordained of old, yea, for the king it is prepared. He hath made it deep and large. The pile thereof is fire and much wood. The breath of the Lord, like a stream of brimstone, doth kindle it.
Topheth is located in the valley of Hinnom, and this fact completes the identification. There is, then, no question at all that Armageddon, the first major battle to decide the issue of the ages between Rome and the Jews, will be fought on the very site of Jerusalem, where Rome was victorious around 1900 years ago. As the war will involve the greatest assembly of armies of all time, the whole land will swarm with troops and armor. But the focus will be in the valley south of the city, in the proximity of the Temple Mount, and adjacent to the Mount of Olives. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to get notifications of new videos. Like, share and comment below.